Hi everybody, Dr. Petri here. Welcome to the first of our flipped world history lectures. Today is chapter 1, Greek Roots of Democracy. This lecture is meant to be more of an outlining lesson for you, and you will see I have outlined some things that are in the book. So you might want to get that history book out and set it right next to your desk and use it as we continue. So the first step in alphanumeric outlining, as you can see, the ancient Greeks built small, independent city-states. Each was a political unit made up of a city and the surrounding lands. The two most influential city-states were Sparta and Athens, and while Sparta stressed stern discipline, Athens glorified the individual and extended political rights to more citizens. In many Greek city-states, the government started as a monarchy and evolved or changed into an aristocracy. Remember, a monarchy is kings, aristocracy are wealthy landowners, nobles. The Spartan government included two kings and a council of elders who advised the monarchs. It was in Athens that the idea of democracy first took root. Under an aristocracy, Athenian wealth and power had grown. This unhappiness, because there were now poor people, this discontent spread through ordinary people, merchants and soldiers, resented the power of the nobles, and this unrest or this unhappiness led to the rise of tyrants who often won the support of the merchant class and the poor by making reforms that helped these groups. So, here you can see Sparta is southern Greece. It was a military state. What happened to the boys? What age they were sent off to the military? You can see even girls were asked to exercise. And then here we talk about the Spartan government, which is the two kings and the council of elders. Remember, it's important to realize that all Greek citizens were only male. Also, they had to be native born. They had to be born there. And this assembly was elected 5 officials only. So the next slide should pop up. Athens, a limited democracy. It tells us where Athens is. It's in northeast Greece. It tells us the definition of democracy, that it's government for the people, by the people. And we talked about how wealth and power grew. And now what we're talking about is the rise of the tyrants, these sort of people who seized power by force, and these tyrants won the support of the merchant class and the poor by making reforms that helped those groups. We call that today pandering to those groups. The Athenian tyrant Cleisthenes broadened the role of ordinary citizens in government. He set up a genuine legislature, and in this fashion, tyrants moved Athens towards democracy. It kind of seems like an oxymoron, like how could these brutal, vicious dictators, these gang leaders, push us towards democracy? Well, they did, because they increased the role of the citizens in the government. So, here in this section, we talk about the Persian Wars, and after winning the Persian Wars, Athens emerged as the most powerful city-state in Greece. Under the able statesman Pericles, the government becomes more democratic. Pericles believes that all male citizens, regardless of wealth or social class, should take part in government. And in addition to serving in the Athenian assembly, male citizens over the age of 30 serve on a jury for up to a year. In a civic speech, Pericles praised the Athenian form of government, stating that power was not in the hands of a minority, but in the hands of the whole people. So, Athens, very important, maybe more important than Sparta, because while Sparta taught the Greeks about war, Athens teaches us about wisdom, about the arts. So this kind of repeats what I just talked about the tyrants, about Cleisthenes, about what a legislature is, a lawmaking body, and how the tyrants actually moved Athens forward toward democracy. You can pause here if you need to, take down these notes. This is section 3 continued, letter G. You see how I have everything organized. I am going to move on in real time. If you need to pause, feel free to do so. So we talked about the Persian Wars that took place in around 500 BC. We talked about how the Athenians defeat the Persians several times. We talked a little bit about Pericles. I apologize. I should have been keeping up with my script. But here is what you need to take out of the book if you want a good, complete set of notes. So here are the Greek philosophers that contributed to Western political thought. We call this modern political thought. The Greeks established constitutional governments, and the United States is modeled after that. So the philosopher Socrates was a long-term defender of democracy. He maintained that the duties of the individual included submitting to the laws of the state, which is why he actually let the state execute him. And he had a chance to escape. He could have asked for forgiveness, but instead he submitted to the laws of the state, and when the laws of the state said execute him, he willingly drank the hemlock. Now, Socrates' main student, Plato, his teacher's pet, rejected democracy, possibly because they had killed his mentor, and argued that the state should regulate every aspect of the citizens' lives and provide for their best interests. Plato had a favorite student who was Aristotle, and Aristotle favored what's called a constitutional government, which focuses on the rule of law, meaning everything has to be written down and everybody has to follow everything. Aristotle argued that even rulers must be subject to the law, and we still use this principle today. In fact, it lies at the heart of all modern constitutional governments. So, the big three when we talk about Greek philosophers: Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Make fun of the people who say Socrates or Plato. It's Socrates and Plato and Aristotle. I want you to make sure you pronounce it right, so you don't look like a fool in front of your friends. So, next we're going to talk a little bit about what an oligarchy was. This is bullet 7. In ancient Greece between 750 and 500 BC, remember, time goes backwards before Christ and then forwards after Christ. So, between 750 and 500 BC, different forms of government evolved. The first cities were ruled by kings, which is a government where a hereditary ruler, which means it's passed down from father to son. So this hereditary ruler that has central power is called a monarch, a king. Now the king usually has a bunch of friends, and these are wealthy landowners. It just so happens that in ancient Greece, these wealthy landowners could afford the bronze weapons and the chariots, and they wound up helping the king and were the military defenders of the city. Gradually, they win power for themselves, and this results in the monarchy changing to an aristocracy. The aristocracy is still a hereditary government, where privilege is passed down from the father to the son, and what happens is this group, this aristocracy, becomes a land-owning elite. So the people who own land form the government and influence the government, but as trade grows, as commerce grows, as wealth is generated, this new middle class of wealthy merchants and farmers and artists develop in some city-states, and these folks are going to challenge the aristocracy for power. The result of this power struggle is what's called an oligarchy, and in an oligarchy, power is controlled in the hands of a small group of wealthy elites. Many people still argue that our government is an oligarchy, since almost every member of the House or Senate, even though they're elected, they're already millionaires. So, have we really evolved as a democracy from the ancient Greeks? And this kind of ends our little section on the ancient Greeks. We're going to talk briefly about the Romans and the Roman Republic. In the oligarchies of ancient Greece, power was in the hands of a small, wealthy elite group, but the ancient Romans had a different type of government. In 509 BC, wealthy Roman landowners overthrow the king, whom they called Caesar. And if you study the history of Rome, you know that Caesar didn't live very long. Caesar was murdered a lot by one of his children, by the Senate, by his friends, by his wife. There were a lot of Caesars that were killed throughout Roman history. So instead of a monarchy, the Romans established what's called a republic. A republic is where you elect people who then write the laws. So the men who were citizens, and of course only men at this point in history, men who were citizens of Rome could elect their officials. There were three groups of citizens that helped govern the republic. They were called the Senate, the magistrates, who were like the judges, and several assemblies. So early Rome was made up of two social orders, the wealthy land-owning, what they called patricians, and you can think of patricide. But a patrician is simply a father figure. So these wealthy landowners were often old men, and these old men passed the wealth down to their sons. So Rome was made up of two groups, the landowners and the plebeians. And although both the plebeians and the patricians voted, only the patricians, only the landowners could be elected to office. So even in the Republic, power generally remained in the hands of the wealthy ruling class. And several of the philosophers that we'll read about actually talk about this. They question, should the wealthy rule? Should philosopher kings rule? Is the middle class most obedient to reason? So when we study Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle a little bit more in depth, and we look at their writings, we will understand what they're talking about, or when it talks about which class of people should be entitled to rule. So that's about the end of this chapter. You've seen I took about 8 bullets. Each bullet had multiple alpha characters underneath it. This is a good idea of what I consider a high quality outline is. Shouldn't be, this was 2 pages typed for me. Shouldn't be longer than 3 or 4 pages, handwritten for you. This is going to be a study tool that you will use. And what I want to talk about is alphanumeric outlining is the first step in your study cycle. Alphanumeric outlining helps you keep multiple sections of chapters and the chapters organized. You're going to keep everything in a 3-ring binder in this class. It should be organized chronologically. You should have dates on these things. You will often need to find maps and facts about certain time periods very quickly to create something for me. So everything that I assign should be kept in your binder and logged in a table of contents so you can quickly find it. Thank you very much for listening. I look forward to seeing you in class tomorrow.